Well, welcome all. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Ukrainian Institute for our artist talk for Immense Journeys, Art, Nature, Science, and Beyond. And with a title like that, I think there's a lot to talk about in this exhibition. And I'd like to introduce the artists. We have Melissa J. Craig, and everyone is sitting right under their names, so this is so handy. We have Lisa A. Frank, and then we have Anne Hughes. Welcome. And I'm Alex Sinitsia. I'll be moderating the talk today. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming here today. So, this exhibition is so much about nature and its connectivity within its own systems and the way we also relate to it. So, I think my first question is, how are you all connected and how did this exhibition come together?
So, so Melissa J. Craig, I met her originally at the Ragdale Foundation. And so I've known her for a while, but through the Ragdale Foundation when we were, maybe I was actually working there because I worked there for a while. I was an artist in residence too. And so I knew what she was doing with her paper arts. And then when I left the Ragdale Foundation, I started working for Zia Gallery. Mm-hmm. And Zia Gallery was located in Winnetka. Right now we're looking for a new place. And at that time then, we were taking on more artists to represent, and we invited Melissa to be part of the gallery, and then later, Lisa actually sent me her information, and then I thought, oh, I like this work, but we had to wait until we had enough a space opening again for another artist. So then she came in, but it's still been, what, 10 years still?
Over 10 years, I think.
Yeah. And so I had this idea in the back of my head at a certain point, especially right now because the gallery, I have time to think about these things since the gallery doesn't have a physical location anymore. And so I've always thought about how interesting it is that one can have be influenced by similar topics and come up with work that is so different. And a lot of times when you're discussing things with other galleries and exhibition venues, and if they've had something that was connected with the environment, they're talking to me like, oh, well, we just did that. We already did that. And I'm thinking, wow, we're all so different. It's like, why would you just say, as if, oh no, we've done that, been there, done that. So my whole point really was, people need to realize that there's so much creative output with similar types of themes that you're interested in. You take it in a different direction. And so that's how this really all came about. And I just kept thinking about it, and I asked them if they wanted to be part of it, and so that's how it came about. I started pulling it together and writing about it, and then this was a perfect venue. I loved the whole idea, and immediately I imagined Melissa's work going over there. I thought, perfect, a curved wall like that, and all organic, and I thought, oh, that would be great. And so, with also the pedestals, and I thought, oh, this will really work. And anyway, so it just kind of evolved that way.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, definitely a true environment has been created in this space from the moment you walk into this kind of immersive installation and then being surrounded by all of this nature around you. Was that kind of the intention behind this, really trying to create an environment in itself while also making a commentary on our current environment, the way humans are affecting it?
Yes, and also about creativity. Mm-hmm. Really so much about creativity, that everybody is a creative individual, and the work that can evolve, it can be so individual and yet have a similar source of inspiration. And you take it, so when I have this long title, and I thought, well, it's this, it's art, it's nature, it's science, because we're all interested in science too, and different ecosystems and what does that mean? And anyway, so I just thought, oh, I'm just going to go with it, and, with a long title.
I like a long title.
Yeah.
What about you, Melissa and Lisa?
I just want to thank Anne because this is her idea. This is her installation of my work. I mean, I haven't. Yeah, we do have different approaches, but they are extremely harmonious together. I really like how it all fleshes out.
Absolutely. I also think it's interesting how, when I was doing some background research, just preparing for this talk, I was really looking at all the works together, and it seems that you all are almost exploring like different realms of our ecosystem, like you, Melissa, kind of like exploring fungi and like microscopic cells, and then Lisa, with your work, very like figurative, recognizable aspects of the natural world, animals and plants, and then you, Anne, exploring the cosmos and kind of like the unknown aspects and mysteries of the universe, like 3 different planes of existence kind of existing in one space.
Yeah, all the interconnections. I always, in my writing about work, I always think about the wonder of the world, the wonder of the universe, and all of our interconnections, and what we know and what we don't know, and that's something also that I love about both Melissa's and Lisa's work. And Melissa, I think, has been very clever and very aware of certain interconnections and ecosystems that people haven't paid attention to until more recently, because you can read books today about fungi and the feeding of like the trees and the underground ecosystem of all of this and how important it is. And here, Melissa's already been doing this for years.
But I do follow that research.
Yeah.
Because it's extremely interesting to me. Noticing the patterns and everything it actually came from my experience of losing most of my hearing. And trying to filter what I would see in nature, try to kind of imagine what things might be wanting to communicate to us. And it goes from there.
Yeah, and I love that whole idea too of all the different forms of communication and realizing, once again, all these things that people are oblivious to, that life is so complex. And then Lisa, in her own way too, it's another whole realm, and 2 very different bodies of work. But I wanted people to be able to get a taste of both bodies of work. This body of work, which is more recent, but this is something that I think you've been doing and continue to do anyway. But yeah.
I spend a lot of time walking in the woods, and I take photographs of whatever I see, just kind of as a personal diary journal, and then they get put into my Lightroom catalog, and then I may or may not use them to stitch together something later on to a composition that I hope conveys the kind of wonder that I experience when I'm in nature, and like that moment when I have to stop and say, how did that happen? A lot of the things that I include are also things that I grow, and butterflies and birds that have been around my home. And
Yeah, I would like to talk a little bit about your process, Lisa, because the elements that you include in your work can be so simple, like a butterfly, starting with something like that, but then it results in these extremely complex, layered images that include elements that are both organic and non-organic, like the inclusion of like chandelier elements in some of those, or the William Morris wallpaper and some of these along the wall. Can you talk a little bit about how you like create those connections?
I have a background in in both theater design, which is relating to that body of work, and textile design. And so I think I still grab elements of decor, and I love William Morris wallpaper, and so I like to kind of put it in underneath as an armature that I then build on top of and kind of make a chaotic statement on, you know, this very traditional structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think the inclusion of the William Morris wallpaper is so relevant to our current, I don't know, political and ecological situation. Like when William Morris was creating that work, it was during the Industrial Revolution, kind of during a time similar to our own, where there's rapid medical, technological change that we don't really understand fully how it'll affect future generations. But at the same time, he was trying to create work that was made by the human hand, you know, also during a time when machines were starting to take over jobs, so similar to our own society. Like, how do you want this work to kind of resonate with people now as we are kind of on the cusp of great political, ecological change, similar to 100 years ago when that wallpaper was created?
Well, I'm looking at these again, and I'm thinking that Mrs. Thorne created these during the Thorne rooms during the Great Depression, and she hired all of these unemployed craftspeople and artists and designers and rug makers to work on these interiors, and I just think that that's an incredible thing to build on top of. Then it has the work of many, many people.
Yeah, absolutely. The hand of so many, Evan, your own on top. And for those who don't know, these rooms that are in these photos that Lisa photo collaged are the Thorne miniature rooms from the Art Institute of Chicago, which are on view and very much beloved in this city. And you as well, Melissa, your work, the hand of the artist is so evident in your work. It seems so labor intensive. And I know we've had a lot of questions about these mushroom books. If you could give a little bit more context on these. I know I've gotten a lot of questions of just what are they about? What is the connection between mushrooms and books, or fungi and libraries?
Well, okay, I came from the world of book arts. I was a bookbinding teacher. I first started making sequential artist books, then I started altering books. So I tend to use them as a vehicle for much of the work. And a whole lot of things came together when these mushroom books happened, both my personal life and just kind of in the world. We were in political situations, and we still are, when these came about, where I was wondering why people weren't out screaming in the streets. At the same time, there was a lot of rhetoric going on in the little tiny book arts world about what a book was, what it could be, how does it communicate, a lot of argument. And I'm not exactly sure how. Well, I wanted to use a fungi, because I wanted to think about spores, spreading spores, how political statements would happen with pamphlet books, things like that. So I wanted to use a fungus. And I went through a lot of tests and back and forth before I decided to go with this Amanita muscaria, because it's got this childlike quality. It's used for children's books, illustrations. But I kind of like that at the same time, where it walks this line between something really cute and funny and something darker. And I decided on the number of mushrooms from the book arts world. There was a critic who said artist books were not artist books unless they were in an edition of at least 100. So I made 99 of these. and a lot of how they are read depends on how they're installed. Now here they're kind of exuberant, but they're still kind of crowding into a corner, having their secret meetings. So I think they communicate through motion, scale, and how they occupy the space. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
It did answer my question, and I think it answered a lot of people's questions. I also wanted to ask about this mask sculpture on the wall and kind of posing a question to all three of you, which, how did the pandemic kind of affect your art practice? Was that like a time of creation or change for any of you in terms of your bodies of work?
These two did great things during the pandemic, especially Anne. She worked like crazy. I did not get, I'll admit it, I got very little solace from my work during that. There were other things going on. This is almost my entire pandemic-related output. And I think putting on a nice, clean lichen mask is good for everyone.
What about you, Lisa and Anne?
I applied for a grant from Sony to do this project during the pandemic. And I borrowed my father's van and, kind of made a studio inside of it and went to 15 zoos, mostly in the southern part of the United States, with the intention of gathering photographs of animals that I could put into these compositions. And it was really tricky because when Sony wanted to have a result from the time and the money that they gave to me, and so I knew I had to come back healthy. And this was during, the real serious lockdown. And so I went to these zoos, didn't go into interior spaces like the reptile house. I just stayed outside and camped. So I tried to stay as far away from the public as I could. And then the thematic resonance that the pandemic had was really rich as far as I was concerned in terms of making these, because our lives were miniaturized during the pandemic, particularly that first period of 6 to 8 months. And like zoo animals who are controlled by moats and fences and reptile houses. So, I don't know, it just seemed very rich in terms of what I could try to bring to it.
Absolutely. And where do you think this, for all of you, this interest in science and nature came from to influence your work? Where did that start?
For me, I would say that I've always had it. And from the time I was a child. And I think where I grew up, I still think back of how lucky we were. We were in a neighborhood that was just starting to grow up because houses were being built back then, and new neighborhoods, because my father came back from the war, and then that's what happened. Then there was a lot of growth, and so we had in the backyard, we had woods in this town that I grew up in. And so on the front you see all these houses that are in neighborhoods that are starting up, and then we would go as kids out exploring in the woods and wander through the woods and find trails that took us out to the other part of town where there was a golf course. And another time, walking up the street through the woods, there was there was a farm also behind the woods. In fact, the people that owned this woods were farmers, and they owned something else in the town. And one time, like, the cows came out on the path at the top of the hill, and like we're all excited. It's summertime, we're all going, oh, as kids, like, oh, the cows are coming out. And so everybody's getting on their bikes, running up the street to find the cows and go explore. Oh my goodness, look, the cows are coming out into the neighborhood. And then things that you would find in the woods, and you go, what is that? And there's one thing I remember, it was like a flower, and we called it the stinking John because it stank. And then there's other things. They look like dried up potatoes, and you stamp on them and all the spores that come out. And then wild raspberries, and picking the raspberries, and the milkweed that we would discover the milkweed. And anyway, I was exposed to all of that, but also I lived close to Montreal, so got to be able to go into the city too. But I think that from the very beginning, and then other times, I think we moved to the States, and right in time, I entered grade 7, and on that year was the beginning of, oh geez, I'm blanking on the term, but it was Earth Day. So the beginning of Earth Day. So in science class, they're talking about Earth Day, and we start to do projects. And I think even before that, traveling, because we used to travel into the States, and then just being aware of do not litter. That's way back when. So I feel like it's like been forever, and I can't believe, sometimes I think about things, and I think, I can't believe we're still in the situation we're in. It's like, why aren't people not paying attention? And when people say they're just now more aware of, you know, climate change and so forth, it's like, my goodness, this has been going on forever of my life. And I can see the changes. So I don't really, anyway, that nature has always influenced me. Mm-hmm. And that sense of wonder. And that sense, and another thing that I've always hung on to is this whole idea of childlike wonder. It's like, I would rather be a child than an adult. This idea of, you know, in high school and all these kids, they want to be a certain way. I was not interested. It's like, no, I enjoyed teachers. So that's also where all of these different topics come in. I enjoyed more the teachers who were interested in ideas and literature and science and all the topics of education. That was fun to me. That was interesting. Whatever teenage typical kids were interested in was boring to me. So it's been forever, all of this sense of wonder. And art came about for me, even back then, was as I was graduating from high school, I kept thinking, well, wow, you know, if you follow art, you can do everything in art, everything that you're interested in, all of the different topics of education can come and enter into your art. And so I thought, that's what I want to do. But I think the one thing too, here are 3 people who've been dedicated to art, I think all their lives, some form of art. And another thing I'm shocked about is how long it takes for us as women to get that kind of recognition. I remember in 1976 looking at art magazines, and I would count on the pages how many women were represented in galleries. And I remember approaching a gallery with a friend of mine, maybe towards the end of the 70s, and this man saying, oh, you know, you're gonna have a really hard time getting a gallery to represent you because they're all gonna think you're just gonna get married and have children. And I didn't say it to him, but I thought, well, if you think this, why don't you break the mold and accept us? But I think that the other thing is that we persevere. all three of us, I think we persevere because it's very meaningful to us, the creativity and the arts and imagination and wonder. So there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's an interesting point, what you said earlier about the environment and how little things have changed. And the same could be said about women in the art world. The disparities are still really large, but we are a women-led institution, and very proud to lead with women-led programming as well. What about you, Melissa and Lisa? What was your start like in terms of your interest in nature, science, and art?
I've always been interested in it. I was an urban child, so I didn't, anytime I could get anywhere in the country, it was wonderful. Didn't really start to make its way into my work until after I learned that I was losing my hearing, after I learned that I would become deaf. Getting out, like up at Ragdale or around anywhere where there is some nature, I got freed from the obligation to communicate because it's a lot of work to talk to people when you're deaf. It's a lot of work to, I read lips, so I'm free from that, and so I could be out there and it would take the place of some other things I was losing, like music. There would be like a visual symphony, in a river and how the water moves, or like aspen trees or birch trees with their leaves. I would hear, kind of syncretizing, hear the music that I couldn't hear with my ears. So I really wanted to bring some of that into the work. And it just got me thinking all the different things that these creatures we inhabit this place with might want to say to us. That's what came about for me. I mean, always the respect, always the fascination, but it didn't really make its way into my work until I needed something to replace things.
There was a time for it. What about you, Lisa?
I grew up in a little town near Galena, and it was kind of environment where you get turned out during the day like urchins, and come back when it was dark. But I also went to Girl Scout camps for summers, and I think that finding a home in a tent in the woods, a bunch of women actually, was really a wonderful way to grow up. I had a hobby of identifying things, pressing leaves between wax paper and ironing them, and so that was something that I enjoyed, and I still do that kind of thing. I'm still always looking for more different types of iris, whatever it is. And then my father, when I was 6, he started a summer stock theater out there. The nearest town had a population of 600, and people told him that he would be storing corn in it in 2 years, and it's still going strong. So I had this exposure of being around theater, around sets and set painters, and that was kind of how I went to New York and started a career. But that was also very fundamental is really fundamental in why these photographs happened.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the theater influence is so interesting. And I wanted to ask you, Anne, some of your paintings do have titles that allude to theater, like this one, l'opera, then theater of life. So do you also have connections to the theater, or is that also an influence in your work?
Well, I've enjoyed attending the theater, and I do also. When I was studying art, when I was getting my BFA and onward, I've been interested in so many things that I wanted to always touch upon this or that or the other experiment. And so for theater, my interest was not in performance, and I was too shy for entering in that. But the idea too of seeing, painting, I took a course and I enjoyed doing that. And I do remember as a kid, even if I was shy, you know, all children are then put into these school plays. And there was something really fun and magical about that. And then in 1967, for the World's Fair in Montreal, there was a theater, the National Theater of Japan came to Montreal. And there was a woman who invited my sister and I and my mother to go to Place des Arts where they were performing. And she got us tickets and we went into Montreal and we went to this, and holy mackerel, to be exposed to kabuki theater at that young age. And it's like, my sister and I was like, wow, what is going on? It was so unusual. And all of the not just the sets, but all of the costumes and then the movements. And when we got out of there, she and I were always going, doing different poses. But it really stuck with me. And then my mother knew that I was interested in kabuki, and she bought me some books, and then later on in high school I was painting pictures that I saw from some of these books, you know, just copying them and painting big posters. But there's something about being exposed to a whole variety of cultures, and that was one thing that was really lucky for me too in Montreal, is that there were people from everywhere, and we were really exposed to that. And even at the World's Fair, it's like we remember the Iranian pavilion and how fascinating that was, and all of the pattern in there. So from the very beginning, then theater was something that was fascinating, even if I was not going to be a performer. But I liked the idea of like scene painting, so I did a little bit of that in college. I took a theater course, but it was the background stuff, or the history of theater, but then you had to participate, and that was fun. And then I think of theater as a metaphor, because life is, we're in our theater of life. And so it comes about again and again, and I think, and I work very intuitively, so I never know what I'm going to end up with. It's, what I do is all a journey, and I may have ideas as I go along, but then I never know where I'm going to end up, and that's part of the fun of the creative process for me. I would never be the type of artist that draws everything out and figures it all out, and then it really evolves. And all of these pieces, they evolved completely. Like, I made that frame, that compound miter frame, and I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe I'll do a painting. But then it grows, and then it's like, no, it's going to be on a different background, and I'm going to cut it out. And so I just felt like as this evolved, this is something that happens, is that as my works start to come together, a lot of times titles pop into my head. And it's like, oh, I know what that's about. Or, oh, and so this really felt like l'opera. It felt like an opera. It's like, but it's an opera of some abstraction, but nature. So that came about a lot. And then, there's one that's called Theater of Life. And once again, I have a lot that have connected to theater. And then this other one here, that's a mixed media piece that's it's got a long title. Arcing Bulldog contemplates the produce of the American Midwest. And that's the one with the glass sitting on, that was a found object. But that was my exposure to going to graduate school at Eastern Illinois, and the water that came out of the taps really stank. And then you'd hear that it was all runoff from the farmlands, and so there was the pollution. And then I went somewhere else. I found this broken glass. I look at the glass. I go, ooh, I love that. It's beautiful. It's like the cosmic, and it's like somebody's tossed it away, but I'll take it. And so eventually one day, and it became almost like some kind of a alter to our environment. But it looks also theatrical because it brings you in, because there's like this perimeter. And then another thing I do is I like to explode out of it, because for me, even if it's a drawing that is a rectangle, what I've decided what I'm doing is that I'm implying that there's always more to consider. So there's always things outside of, we're the ones that cut out part of our maps into these squares, or archaeology, which I did a little bit of that too, and into squares, and you study everything within. But there's always more beyond that, so that's where this explosion out of the frame or implication of other imagery beyond comes together.
It really surprises me to hear that you don't do a lot of planning before you execute your paintings and drawings, just because they're so meticulous and they seem so planned, because they're telling, I don't know, these like mythologies that may be like real or imagined. Do you two similarly not plan your works and just kind of organically see where like a certain photograph will take you, or like, I don't know, a material will take you maybe? What do you think?
I usually do have some kind of plan, but mostly it's because I have to figure out, there's an image, and then I have to figure out how to make it with these materials. And so there's tests that happen and things like that. That's also partially my interest in science, is the science of paper making and how some of the fibers work together. It's not just conceptually,
Yeah, it's a science in
physically,
itself.
an
What about,
interest.
what about for you, Lisa?
I don't plan very much. I choose themes, but I don't have an idea of what I'm going to end up with. It usually goes through many different phases before I think, oh, this is kind of done, I guess.
Yeah, like how do you decide when something is done? Because they are so richly layered in textures. When do you know when to stop? Or do you find that you like will reopen a file and keep, I don't know, keep tinkering with it?
Well, I can't do that anymore because I sell them as limited editions, and so I could do another version. But I usually feel like I'm on to the next thing. It's very hard to say this is finished. It's I'm kind of critical. I'm a very critical editor, and so I arrive at that decision. And I can't even talk about it. I don't know how I do it. Somehow it happens.
All good. Well, we're almost going to wrap up this talk, and before we open the floor to questions, I just have one more question for each of you, which is, what is something that you want a viewer to take away from this exhibition?
I would say the fragility of the planet, I would say, maybe a little humility that we're kind of arrogant as a species. Thinking that we control it all. That's my bit. You're not.
I think that I'm looking for viewers to just look at familiar things differently and to have some kind of experience of awe or wonder or humor or just to be taken away, however instant it is, however short that is.
Yeah.
And I can relate to both of these points of view, and I would say also the importance. I just really feel there's an importance of the arts and imagination and creativity, and that it's kind of limitless in what we can do, and I just hope that people can see that. And then also, yes, let's care for our environment, and let's take joy in nature and do what we can. It's way past time. And support the arts. They're important. And it feeds our soul. It's a creative and kind of a spiritual journey. And this idea, and you know, here's something else when you're talking about COVID. And you hear today so many people that it seems like it's just even exploded with the amount of mental health issues. The arts really help people of all ages, and we need to celebrate that and encourage people to explore the arts. You're going to find out something about yourself if you go into that, and know that there's so many different pathways. There is no one way in. And so that would be another thing, a celebration of the arts as a whole.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Well, on that note, I'll open it up to questions from the audience. Yes.
Well, I have kind of a general question. You know each other, you know each other's work, but seeing it together here, has that given you individually a different idea about your own work or interplay or resonance in ideas?
Could you hear what
No,
Maureen
not quite,
said?
sorry.
Maureen was talking about the sort of seeing this in the environment, all of our, even though we know each other, have known of each other's works, does it give you a different kind of resonance or feeling or different direction, or I'm kind
Right.
of paraphrasing.
When now that you see your work together instead of individually, is it giving you a different viewpoint of your own or the other person's work?
For me, it kind of reinforces everything. And just to see the different approaches with the same sort of reverence and irreverence that we approach things with. So it feels good to have a community of people working in the same way.
And I see so much color. And it's rich, and it's not inhibited. And that's been really wonderful to feel a part of.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for your work and your words and your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.